Now, initial research, like I said, there can be a million angles, okay, going in. Imagine, so I'll give you an example, okay? One of the deals that, in fact, this is the one that we walked in Ivor, which was up for sale. Do you remember? It's up for 830 grand. I sent an email this morning to the agent because the landlord hasn't got in touch with me. I replied saying, would the lender accept an offer subject to planning? Thank you. My name below it and my number. That's all. Okay. What I'm trying to work out is, because the deal doesn't quite stack, right? It's got barely 20% profit margin, not even 20%. But if I go in and if I can get this option agreement, apply for planning, get planning for 5 townhouses, and then sell the option, I can make about maybe 150, 200 grand. Okay. One application, the likelihood of that getting approval is very, very, very high. You saw when we were walking, right?
Yeah.
Everything is getting developed and everything is coming into townhouses. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the chances of getting that is very, very high. I will take that. Okay. It's a 1,000 square meter plot. So it's a very, very, very large plot. Okay. So it's very easy to get about 5. We can even get 6. If I can get 6, I can all of a sudden make £250,000 in just planning gain. Okay. And that becomes a decent deal. Does that make sense? Okay. So you always have to look at the angle that you need to be able to go in and negotiate that deal. Okay. Likewise, the other deal that we're looking at, the angle on that is, because it's a commercial to resi in prime location of London, right? The angle on that is, because it's a commercial, and I think there is one more competitor that we're dealing with, but they want to use it as a commercial. And they put a very long list of subject tos, okay? And I was told by the person who's brought the deal in, the agent in this case, he's saying that the likelihood of that going through is very low. And then if we go in and we say we can pay you a little above the asking price, in this case, the asking price is 2.1 million, we can pay you 2.2, maybe even slightly more, maybe 2.2 to maybe 2.3, making it sort of a 10% hike. All of a sudden, this guy's going to start thinking, okay, well, this guy's giving me a long subject tos. These guys are giving me 10% more, but it's only one subject to. And one subject to is subject to planning.
Yeah.
Okay. So and we can do this pretty quickly because it seems like a lot of that is under PD. So that application can be pretty quick. Okay. 6-7 months down the line, we could have the planning in place and we could be moving with legals pretty quickly. Okay. And then we don't want to necessarily, no, let me rephrase. We don't have to necessarily convert. We can just sell it subject to as the option. Okay. Even with that, there is at least 500,000. Okay. And if we were to convert it, that's got at least over 1 million. It's got roughly about 1.3 million. Okay. In net profits. Okay. So you always have to look at the angle that you can go in. And because there's so many variables in the deal, it will take you some time to be able to work out the angle you need. Does that make sense? Okay, it's not something you can learn immediately. You just have to go through this process of checking deals and going through deals a long time before you start to get this gist of, okay, I now know what angle I can take on this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and every deal is different. Like literally, you could be looking at a planning gain deal, you could be looking at a block deal, or you could be looking at a hotel deal. Okay, I'll tell you a couple of them that we are looking at. I won't give you names or numbers here, okay, because we've not closed the deals, right? But we have Nav knows this. We have a hotel deal on the table. There is a competitor behind us as well. It's a 100-room hotel, okay, and the faster I move, the more chances I have. Okay. Obviously, what we propose in terms of money will be the biggest factor, but at the same time, it's speed as well in this case. Okay, because they've already exchanged, but they've not completed. They already have a deadline of completion. If they don't complete by that day, they lose the deposit that they've paid for exchange. Okay, so we have to move fast as we can. Okay, my aim is I'm planning a visit there. As soon as I visit, I'm not even leaving the hotel. I'm going to sit there, prepare the appraisal, and hand it over to the person, as in appraisal, as in proposal in this case. Okay, so I'm going to just literally propose, here is us. If you like what you see, I can get the legal started tomorrow. Does that make sense? Okay, so you always have to observe what's their most important factor while they are considering you. Important factor in terms of in the deal itself. Sometimes it's speed, other times it's the kind of money that they're going to get, other times it's the reliability. There can be a whole lot of factors. You have to work out that factor, whatever the factor is of the vendor, and then be able to propose based on that. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Okay, so you have to work out that factor. Okay, if I was to take you a step back and share another deal, which is a block of units to be taken under management, again, they are not worried about the speed because it's actually their own asset. Not as yet, at least. Okay, speed can become a factor later. I think in this case, my workout was, their factor was,
This will be big.
sorry, could you mute
Most
yourself?
is golden.
In this case, my observation was, because it's their own deal, they would want to see who's going to give them the maximum money. Okay, that's just my observation while I was having that meeting. I may be not as accurate, but I know it's one of the major factors in terms of who they will consider to manage. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you always have to observe from your conversation and the grow model that you will use, asking those open questions to what is the main factor or the list of factors, and taking those factors in place. That's your angle to go into the deal. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Work it out with your questions. Okay, so it's not just the emotional hot button. It's not just the trust and the rapport that you need to build and build your credibility and prove your credibility. But at the same time, what is the factor in the deal? What is the main reason in the deal that they should give it to you? They must give it to you. Does that make sense? You have to work that out, and that is the angle you want to take. Okay. One of the deals that we have under legals, which I've shared previously, is the 14 flats, right? I sat down with them. I negotiated it down 40 grand. But their main factor was that for them to be able to retire, because it's a retirement sale, for them to be able to retire, they needed X amount of money to retire, buy another property in front of them, and then have a fairly comfortable life. They already had a number in their mind. They won't give it to me, but I kept negotiating £5,000 every step of the way. Okay, so it took me almost 8 steps of back and forth to negotiate 40 grand. Does that make sense? Okay, but I just had to get to that number in their mind. Okay, 40 grand is a reasonable money. As soon as we pick it up, we are in positive equity of 40 grand. Does that make sense? Okay, so you always have to, like I said, there's loads of factors that you have to work and play with, and then remove any competition. So I turned up to these guys, said, if I was to give you that money, that you promise not get me competing with someone else, because many times the vendors will start legals with you, and they will start legals with someone else as well, and they won't even tell you. and whosoever completes first gets the deal. Does that make sense? They're not obliged to just start legals with you. Okay. So,
so sorry, Jack. So if somebody starts legals with you, it's still not a
no,
done deal.
no, no, no. I have lost, just in the last 5 years, I've lost £14,000 just in legal fees.
Wow.
Okay. So they can start legals with 4 different people, and they won't even tell you, and they will just wait for the person who closes first. They're not legally obliged to stay with you. So what I did was, when I was negotiating, I got them to verbally promise that they will not get me competing with anyone else. I also said that if you were to pull out, you will pay all my legal costs. Okay? Because I've lost way too much money in the last few years. Okay? We've paid so far, just on that deal, £4,500 between legals and valuation. Okay? So if they pull out today, they will pay the 4.5, not me. Okay? So you have to protect yourself from competition while you're negotiating.
But Jack, if you did if you're doing like a delayed completion where you exchange, but then that one you've secured yourself because
Yeah, so once you exchange, it's secured.
yeah.
Yeah, so once you exchange, the guys, so exchange is a legally binding agreement. Okay? And please bear in mind, once you exchange, not just that the vendor is legally blind, so are you.
Yeah.
So if, let's say let's say the property is worth $1 million, you paid 10%, let's say you paid 100 grand, not just that you lose your 100 grand if you pull out, the landlord can come and sue you for any losses, further losses, which means he can go and sell the property for $500,000 and he will come and sue you for the 400 grand. Okay? They can do that easily. So make sure when you exchange that you're pretty confident that you will buy. Okay? Because otherwise you're in trouble. Okay? There's no going back after once you've exchanged. Let's put it this way. Okay? So yeah, I was going back to, like I said, you have to be very aware of the angle you need to be able to go into any kind of deal. I've actually just shared with you a planning gain deal. I've shared with you a block management deal. I've shared with you a hotel deal. I've also shared with you a block that we are buying as a freehold. Okay, so it's almost like you're going in, and the questioning that you will do, as in the grow model that you will use, it's not just about what they tell you, it's about also what they're trying to hide or not telling you, whatever that might be. You have to work that out. You have to keep digging into the deal and get the full picture, and then work your way forward from that. Does that make sense? Look, a lot of this is very, very difficult to understand. But the more you practice, the more you will see how it works, right? You have to keep digging deeper into everything that they tell you. And the more you dig deeper and deeper, the more pixels in the picture, and the further the story, as in you'll be able to get a complete set of the story that they're telling you. Okay? In fact, one of the main reason when you go into your deal, one of the biggest, most important factor is that you want to find out why are they selling. Okay? Because they may not tell you that. You do need to find out. I will not go into a deal, never go into a deal, if you don't know the actual reason of why they're selling. Raise your hand if you see where I'm going with this. Never go into a deal if you do not know why are they selling or giving you for management in the first place. Okay? Because if you don't know the real reason and you only know the surface reason of what they're telling you, you're likely going to make a loss. Okay? When I was negotiating these deals, the ones under management, I'm negotiating them on the basis of 6 months trial. Because just because someone is telling me a story, I am just not going to take it for as you tell me. I'm going to test it. So I'm going in and saying 6 months trial, as in, yes, I agree with you X amount of money that I'm going to pay you. but that will be subject to the performance of the hotel, which is a lot dependent on the location. Okay, so it is subject to a trial. In that case, what would happen? What's the worst case that happens in 6 months? I may just break even and not make it. Okay, but you're not going to sit there and lose money. If you go in, you sign up a deal, let's say for 5 years, and you don't know the numbers, or you may not have the accuracy of the numbers, you're walking into a deal that could make you a loss. And remember, my job is to make sure that you don't make a loss. Okay, that's my main job. Okay, either you realize it or not. I said it verbally. Okay, so do not walk into a deal unless you are 100% sure that you are going to be able to pay the rent, you're going to be able to pay if you're buying it, you know, whatever the factors that you need to start writing this stuff down. You need to understand to create what they call the SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Whenever you're going into a deal, you need to sit down and write the SWOT analysis. Okay? If you do not write SWOT analysis, you are walking into a deal that's going to make you a loss. It's as simple as that. When you are working on SWOT, and you know, what that will give you is negotiation tactics, because you would know their weakness. Does that make sense? You would know your strengths, you would know their weaknesses, and vice versa. You know your strengths and weaknesses, you know their strengths and weaknesses, you know the opportunities they have, you know the opportunities you have, and you would know the threats they have, and just make sure that they don't get to learn about the threats that you have. Okay, SWOT analysis is the main factor. Okay, and the only way you can do that, you got to remember, you don't tell the vendor you're doing SWOT, you're just using GROW model. Okay, it's almost like a subliminal questioning to understand what's happening behind the scene. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions so far? Ahmed, starting with you.
No, all good and clear.
Anara, any questions?
The idea is for every case, for example, for hotels, it's one way of looking at the deal. For block of flats, another. Yes, and I would like to write this everything for myself separately.
And for, it's not just for different kinds of deals. It's different for each deal. So you could be looking at one hotel block. You could be looking at one hotel, and you could be looking at another hotel, and they both might have different angles of going in.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Grace, any questions? Nav, any questions?
No, it's fine. I understood.